Welcome back to our course in Module 2. In our last module, we did a very basic introduction to the world of federal contracting. Now we are going to discuss the FAR and the federal acquisition process. I'm Alex, your AI host. Now let's get started. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, is the primary set of rules governing federal procurement. It ensures that the government's purchasing process is fair, competitive, and transparent while achieving best value for taxpayers. Why is the FAR important? Compliance with the FAR is mandatory for businesses seeking government contracts. It ensures legal protection, fosters trust, and enhances the likelihood of successful contract execution. The FAR is divided into 53 parts, each covering specific topics. For example, Part 1 covers the Federal Acquisition Regulations System. Part 2 provides definitions of words and terms. Part 12 of the FAR covers the acquisition of commercial items, and Part 19 covers small business programs. One other section or part that may be of interest is Part 52 covering solicitation provisions and contract clauses. There are 3 key principles of the FAR, which are also reminders for how to conduct business with the government. Full and open competition. Most contracts must be openly competed, although some exceptions apply. Integrity. Vendors and government officials must adhere to ethical standards. Best value. Both the government and the contractor or vendor must focus on achieving quality while managing costs. You can access the FAR online at acquisition.gov, and you can search it by part, subpart, or clause number. As mentioned earlier, parts 2, 9, 12, and 19 are good starting points. Do you need to read the entire FAR? Of course not, but you want to be familiar with it in general, and read specific parts that may be of interest to your company. One final note before we move on. While the FAR covers all federal agencies, there is also the DFARS, which applies specifically to the Department of Defense. All you need to know for now is that the DFARS is a supplement to the FAR that adds additional requirements and clauses for defense contractors. The federal acquisition process is the overarching system or framework used to plan, award, and manage government contracts. It includes all activities from the initial identification of a need to the final disposal of the acquired product or conclusion of the service. Let's go step by step. Step 1. Identify needs. The agency determines what it needs and the specific requirements for the goods or services. Think of this in terms of if you need to paint your house. Are you painting the exterior or interior or both? If exterior, what is the UV exposure and weather exposure? The requirements specify what type of paint and what color to fit the exact need. Step 2. Conduct market research. In this step, government representatives, commonly the program managers, research potential suppliers and assess the market's ability to fulfill the need. Does a product exist to fit the need? How many companies are capable of providing the service? This is where you may see an RFI come out. An RFI is a request for information. The government uses RFIs to find out what solutions are available, who can do it, what the cost might be, and how long it will take to complete. RFIs are important tools for the government, but also great opportunities for companies to engage with the government customers and highlight their ability to provide services. Step 3 is to develop an acquisition plan. This is when the government decides on the procurement strategy, such as contract type, competition level, such are full open or small business, and how they will evaluate submissions or proposals. Will it be best price or best value, which means not necessarily the lowest offer? For Step 4, the government publishes the solicitation. This is when an RFP or RFQ is posted on sam.gov. We will cover sam.gov in a later module, but an RFP is a request for proposal, or how will you and your company address the need, requirement, or problem, and an RFQ is a request for quote, and it basically covers how much will something cost. Step 5 is when the government receives all the proposals or quotes. Vendors submit their bids, including technical and pricing information according to the instruction in the solicitation. It is generally going to be an electronic submission, either by email or uploaded to a specific website or portal. Step 6. Evaluate proposals. The agency evaluates submissions based on the earlier established criteria, for example, technical capabilities, vendor experience, and cost. Awarding the contract is Step 7. The winning bidder is notified and the contract is finalized. Step 8 is the performance of the contract and contract oversight by the government. The agency monitors the contractor's performance to ensure deliverables and deadlines are met. And finally, Step 9, closeout of the contract. Once obligations are fulfilled, the contract is closed and final reviews are conducted. Now let's take a look at the phases of federal procurement. This is a more focused aspect of the federal acquisition process, dealing specifically with the purchasing or procurement phase. It concentrates on the formal steps required to procure goods or services from external contractors. There are 5 phases of federal procurement: planning, solicitation, evaluation, award, and post-award. Phase 1, planning. Identify the government's needs and conduct market research to identify vendors and solutions. This is when you may see the RFIs come out, which we spoke about earlier. In this phase, the government develops the acquisition strategy and finalizes the procurement plan. Phase 2, solicitation. This is when the government publishes the solicitation on sam.gov, the RFP or RFQ. There are a few others, but these are the only 2 you need to know for now. During this phase, vendors or contractors may have questions around the solicitation. Typically, the government will set a deadline for the submission of any questions. Once that deadline passes, the government will prepare written responses and post the Q&A on sam.gov, so all interested vendors will be provided the same information. If there is a change to the solicitation, either due to the Q&A or some other factor, the government will issue an amendment. Be very attentive to these. Generally speaking, a signed copy of the amendment will be submitted along with your proposal. No matter how minor the amendment, pay attention. Failure to acknowledge it may invalidate your submission. Phase 3 is evaluation. This is when the government receives and reviews the proposals or quotes from the vendors. The evaluations are a formal process, but keep in mind that the government is allowed to conduct discussions or negotiations with some vendors, if needed. Phase 4, award. The government selects the winning vendor based on the evaluation results. All bidders are notified of the award decision. Those that did not get selected may usually request a debrief from the government. This will provide a summary of what was strong and what was weak in your submission. These are a great resource to help you improve future proposals. The final phase, Phase 5, is post-award. The government, along with the vendor, manages the contract deliverables and timelines. The government monitors vendor performance through regular reviews, which commonly take the form of reports submitted by the vendor. During the execution of the contract, the vendor will typically have a main point of contact with the government, whose title is Contracting Officer's Representative, or COR. A COR is a federal employee who is designated by a contracting officer, CO, to oversee the administration of a contract. CORs are responsible for ensuring that contractors meet their contractual obligations. And that's it for your foreign federal acquisition process overview. Like many of the concepts taught here and in federal contracting as a whole, what seems like a daunting endeavor is really quite simple once you break it down into its basic elements. You can do it. This micro-learning course is written and produced by Michael Bouchard. Michael is a former U.S. naval officer and has nearly 20 years of experience in sales and management consulting, specializing in reorganizations, turnarounds, and realignments. Over the course of his career, Michael has worked with more than 8 different federal agencies and dozens of private sector clients across the United States, Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia. If you have any questions about federal contracting, feel free to contact him at michael@takotaglobal.com or connect with him on LinkedIn. Thank you, and we'll see you in Module 3.